When World War II began, America was on the sidelines, watching Germany, Japan, and Italy wage war on their nearby countries. This changed suddenly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. America was thrust into World War II and swore allegiance with the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and France to defend against the Axis powers. From then, the indifferent tone in the American populace shifted into a pressing and urgent one. The government realized the need for a dramatic shift in America was imminent. America needed manpower for the military, awareness of the upcoming war, civilian support through taxation, and a conviction against their new enemies. Iconic posters such as I Want You featuring Uncle Sam and Rosie Riveter's We Can't Do It first appeared during this time. Revolutionary radio announcements became the cheapest and most frequent media for Americans, but nothing matched the influence that of propaganda animation made at the time, with visual, auditory, and meaningful messages. Animation propaganda was the main source of boost for patriotism in the independent, freedom-oriented country, where conscription has always been a topic of dispute. Starting from 1942, animation became the main game changer for nationalistic and patriotic support. It encouraged military volunteer numbers, taxation, workforce, and spite for the Axis powers. They became the single most prominent method of communication between the government and people through the use of innocuous, familiar faces from Disney, Looney Tunes, and more famous franchises, advocating for the war and support for the American cause. As the need for a guiding voice became more pressing, the government decided to hire the bankrupt Disney Animation Studios to produce films educating the public about the war effort and military. Disney produced as much as 27,000 feet of tape the year before, but was now able to create 90,000 feet of tape for the US Navy within 3 months. In 1941, the first Disney tax propaganda was produced named The New Spirit, featuring Donald Duck as a patriotic American citizen and paying his income tax in order to help America to purchase supplies for the war. A sequel to The New Spirits, called The Spirit of 43, showed the manufacturing of all kinds of guns, dive bombers, battleships, and heavy weaponry that will blast the aggressor from the sea. The narrator addresses the role of the audience and calls them to action. They also made more military and educational films, which were easy to understand and crucial skills for soldiers to learn. Camouflage was an instructional video with live footage accompanied by a cartoon animal teaching and narrating the instructions. This allowed for people to learn the skills in a more intuitive and entertaining fashion, while still maintaining a vigilant mindset. Disney also used their animations to ridicule the Axis powers, the most prominent one being the Fuhrer's face, which tells a story of Donald Duck as a miserable Nazi worker who needs to be frugal with his spending and has to do an absurd amount of the Nazi salute. This helped American people to get a laugh at the silly enemies and gather ideas in their ways of their indecencies, although exaggerated and riled up hate for the Axis power. The movie went as far as winning an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film in 1943. At the time, there were many people who were unfit for the war and stayed at home. Animation offered them opportunities to help. Getting out of the frying pan into the firing line, the government rallied people to donate excessive oils to butcheries and make bombshells.
Don't throw away that bacon grease. Housewives of America, one of the most important things you can do is to save your waste kitchen fats, bacon grease, meat drippings, frying fats. We and our allies need millions of pounds of fats to help win the war.
That was able to let idle participants who cared about the war to contribute from home by merely saving oil from cooking. Warner Brothers' Looney Tunes propaganda gained traction around 1942, similar to Disney. But instead of providing straightforward, educational, and inspirational films, they promoted exaggerated stereotypical caricatures of Japanese soldiers, Joseph Stalin and Hitler. This system of ridicule fed anger, fear, and frustration against the Axis powers and especially the Japanese. Their most popular animation at the time, now considered so racially inappropriate that it was banned. The film Tokyo Jokyo showed Japanese soldiers running into trees because of their own small eyes, incompetently walking off their own bombs, and pranking their own soldiers fatally. The animation also showed Italian soldiers as sluggish jesters barely holding on to the war. This crude humor was used to build morale and community, banding all Americans together to recognize Japanese as mindless, gap-toothed, and skinny-eyed mobs that deserved to be treated like aliens. These films resulted in extreme implicit prejudice, even in domestic land. Education for Death, The Making of a Nazi, portrayed the degradation of a child's mind as it was brainwashed by Nazis into becoming a war machine. It painted Germany as a threat to not only the populace, but the children especially. Films such as Any Bonds Today and Bugs Bunny Bond Rally explicitly promoted war bonds through their music and dialogue.
We'll be coming down your way. Get your savings out when you hear him shout, Any bonds today? Come on and get him, folks. Come on, skip right up and get him. Any bonds today?
Other films from Disney like Donald's Decision, Phony Fables, and Altogether portrayed characters endorsing the war by spending less on themselves in order to purchase war-saving certificates and obtain recognition for helping the war. Donating scrap metal or reusable chemicals became another demand for the war, and animated episodes like Scrap Happy Daffy and Ding Dong Daddy showed Daffy defending his scrapyard from metal-eating Nazi goat sent by Hitler. What's more daunting is that animation typically marketed as fit for audiences of all ages, meaning not only were adults watching these, children and teenagers' growing worlds were built around these. Racism and spite quickly evolved into a large part of the culture and created the illusion that America was in fact mentally, intellectually, and physically superior, which eventually led to a massive unified drive in the American populace. Effects on the American population was immense, with more than 60 independent films and series made by circulating publicly. American citizens quickly turned their attention from recovering from Pearl Harbor to a much grander, much more hostile goal, attacking and defeating the Axis powers. Political figures such as Senator Earl Warren blamed Japanese Americans for sabotaging and destroying the American effort, naming them as enemy aliens. He issued a public warning in January 1942. The Japanese situation as it exists in this day today may well be Achilles' heel of entire civilian defense effort. Soon after, over 100,000 Japanese Americans were stripped of their property and financial rights and forced to relocate into concentration camps in West states, now called Japanese internment camps, with little opposition from local Americans. Most saw the Japanese as secondary citizens, or as President Roosevelt called them, enemy aliens, therefore deserving of such treatment. The work ethic and enthusiasm for America's success went through a paradigm shift. Willingness to pay taxes rose by 37% since the beginning of the war, and women's workforce increased by 15%, despite women's recruitment being greatly discouraged initially. America unified a utilitarianist mindset to defeat the Axis powers, even if it meant changing the cultures and technology completely. In the end, 20% of the American population, around 50 million men from ages 18 to 45, drafted for the war. Animated propaganda appearing in World War II was a new form of media to transmit ideas from one to another, and its effects were widespreading with it being able to appeal to children and adults alike. This form of communication felt a boost in patriotism, systemic hate, and stereotypes against the Axis powers, although it resulted in some negative effects such as excessive racism against Japanese and Germans. It ultimately was an effective tool rallying the people to perform their duties, paying income tax, trading in oil, and conscripting, all for the American cause, which paid off in the end with the victory of the war by the Allies.